remember one day another student from my high school came into the program and saw me and just kind of stopped in their tracks and was like, I don't know how I feel about you being here. And I was like, why do you get an opinion about whether I'm here or not? But then also I realized, okay, I think this is about, am I Asian enough to be in this space?
Welcome to the Multiracialverse podcast. I am your host, Antonio Fernandez, and today in episode 6, we dive into the fascinating journey of Tracy Held, a multi-talented writer, director, actor, and activist. Tracy is a mixed Asian American writer hailing from San Francisco Bay Area, but now making waves in Los Angeles. As the founder of All Terrain Theater and the co-founder of 31 Plays in 31 Days Project, Tracy has been a trailblazer in the theater community. Her artistic repertoire spans stage plays, web series, political music, film shorts, operas, and indie comics, each piece a testament to her boundless creativity. Beyond her artistic endeavors, Tracy is a single mom who is also a marketing and fundraising consultant, lending her expertise to nonprofits, schools, and entertainment companies. But Tracy's impact goes beyond her creative pursuits. With a strong allyship to marginalized groups and a deep love for the environment, Tracy's work aims to amplify the voices of underserved communities and raise awareness about justice and environmental issues. Her commitment to social justice and environmental activism shines through in every project she undertakes. From her roots in theater to her advocacy for social and environmental causes, Tracy Held is a force to be reckoned with. Join us as we explore her inspiring journey and the power of creativity to drive positive change in this mixed up world. So without further ado, let's dive into episode 6. Hello, Tracy. Welcome to the Multiracialverse. How are you doing today?
Hello. I'm okay. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you here. I've been doing my research, and I'm just fascinated with people. So, learning about you and the work that you do, I'm excited to talk about it and how your culture and heritage have impacted you and the work you're doing now. So, let's start by talking or telling the listeners a little bit about yourself and your family.
Sure. So I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm Chinese and Eastern European. The Eastern European part comprises a lot of cultures, but the biggest one is Bulgarian. I initially studied conservation and resource studies, very concerned about the environment. I got into the art scene in the San Francisco Bay Area when I was in high school. And then as I worked in nonprofit marketing and fundraising, I started also exploring theater. And that totally shifted my priorities because all of a sudden I was very interested in writing and storytelling. So I eventually went to grad school in Pennsylvania and then moved to Los Angeles to focus on screenwriting.
Wow, what a journey. And we'll get into talking a little bit. I'm super interested. I'm a big-time environmentalist. And it's tough when you're an environmentalist, then you're with your family and you're trying to force your will on everybody, but I'm interested in talking to you about that and how you're working in that space too with the writing you're doing. So you told me your dad was the one that was of Eastern European descent and your mother was Chinese.
My mom's mother was actually born in California. So we actually have a few generations here in the United States. Her father was born in Hong Kong. And my dad's side, I'm a little less clear about my dad's side, but yeah, he's not first generation either.
Oh, right on. Okay. And so growing up then, what was the dominant culture in your household in relationship to religion, food, traditions?
Like, what did holidays look like?
Yeah, so since I grew up in the Bay Area, I was really close to my mom's side, so we did a lot of Chinese cultural things, but I would say definitely our family was very, very Americanized. So we did a mix of, like Chinese New Year kinds of activities or like hanging out in Chinatown every Sunday, to anything else that an American family might be expected to do.
And what was the primary language spoken in your household?
So my mom also spoke Cantonese, which she spoke more with family members. There was a brief attempt to try to teach me some Chinese, but Chinese is all the versions of Chinese are very difficult because, difficult for native English speakers because they are tone based. And so if you say something kind of a little bit off, it's totally wrong. And so I didn't really have a lot of people who were patient enough to teach me. And then I got very, you know what I mean? Like I just got very frustrated. And so I gave up on it until I was much older. But the good news is because I was exposed to Cantonese a lot as a young person, I could pick up the tones faster when I was older and ready to learn about it. So I definitely had family members who almost only spoke Chinese. And so I had to learn certain things, but I wasn't necessarily saying it back.
So it was kind of a mix to not teach it at home, was kind of a mix of just that it would almost be like you would have to be almost immersed in it, and it seemed like teaching it was more frustrating for you or for your mother, or
Yeah, well, okay, so actually there's kind of a funny story too, because this is a little bit more complex than what I let on. So my mom has a funny sense of humor, and she liked to listen to this Chinese singer who would sing these really silly, satirical, goofy comedy songs. And so apparently when I was very small, I got pretty good at singing along these songs with her. But then at one point, my grandfather was like, "Why are you teaching her this stuff? It's not appropriate." So then I think she got a little frustrated because it's like the thing that would have made it fun for her to do wasn't really accessible anymore. So yeah, it just kind of didn't work out that way. And part of me wishes that I had a little bit more formal practice with it, but I also feel like I turned out how I turned out, and it's okay.
Yeah. And I think that's the conversations I've been having is, there's so many layers, and being biracial, multiracial is just one layer, and talking about you as the individual is just one layer. And as it's been so far, I've had mostly female guests, which is that's another whole other complexity on top of that changes culturally and in society and other things. Our parents, are human also, and they have their own little quirks and picked up their own little things. So yeah, I appreciate you grounding us in that. Did your parents ever talk about was them being a mixed couple a big thing when they met? Did they talk about that at all?
I got the impression that it wasn't that big of a deal for them because, like I said, they were pretty Americanized family, and I think that their experiences were also very multicultural, like just living in the areas that they lived in and growing up in different places. I feel like they were exposed to a lot of things, so it didn't seem like there was very much that surprised them. I feel like for the most part, it's not that we didn't experience microaggressions or anything, but I feel like I was kind of oblivious to a lot of prejudice. Apparently, the worst thing that my mom could remember that she thought to tell me about was one time a family member who was white offered her said that she was going to dinner and they didn't know what to feed her because they didn't have any rice. And it's like,
man. Yeah.
She could eat a lot of things.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but if that's kind of the worst thing, I feel like we sort of did pretty well with it. I mean, definitely members of my family experienced discrimination, but it wasn't so much about us being, multicultural as a family that I'm aware of.
Yeah. And did you, with your cousins and others, was there ever, especially like on your father's side, if your families were hanging out, have any questions like, oh, your family's different, or, was there any of that?
I don't think that I got any of that. I have kind of an interesting experience where, with the way that I look, if somebody is older than me, a lot of times they won't realize that I'm Chinese.
Yeah.
But if somebody's about my age, and definitely if they're younger, not only do they know that I'm multiracial, but a lot of times people can figure out that I'm also Chinese.
Wow.
Which I think is very interesting. And so I think that, my cousins, I feel like they may not have even really registered that I was multiracial. You know what I mean? Like, I just was their cousin.
Yeah. No, I totally get that. I think that was it's very similar. We're living in times right now where there's this evolution of, I think, awareness, people talking about it more, but we're talking about it here to just, bring your story to light and the experience to light, and not make it like a this or that, like trying to say, oh, here's another category, it's more like, oh, there's some cool experiences out there, and it's partial, and they come about because there's these two people living in two totally different worlds, but a lot of times we don't talk about it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would say that when I think about this topic, it's more as an adult that I kind of pick up on stuff, because I feel like part of it as a kid was that I was really oblivious to nuance in how people talk to me, for one thing. And also, I think that as an adult, because I'm more aware of how the things that people say and the minor ways that they say the things that they're thinking have a lot of meaning that is not necessarily explicitly stated. But I would say even people are more explicit with me now. And so sometimes I'll hear things and I'll be like, did you really think that was okay to say to me? So
and how do you jumping around a little bit, how do you deal with those types of microaggressions now that we understand, I think, as a society, that like, oh yeah, those are prejudice, or we call racist sounds so harsh, but it's kind of, what do they call it? Like a almost like an unconscious bias statement that is racist,
Right. Yeah. I mean, I feel like, so I read this really interesting book, and I regret that I didn't remember the title of it, but human brains need to be able to assign stereotypes to categories of information so that they can just get through the day and make decisions. And so I have a lot of patience for that kind of things. Like, I get that if somebody doesn't have to consider things that are important to me because they don't live in my life, then they don't need to know everything that I know. I forget the name of the book, which makes me sad, but I was reading a book that explained that people need to process information by stereotyping certain categories of information just so that they can get through the day, because we need to generally be able to handle very large amounts of information without stopping to thoughtfully process every single piece. So I get that sometimes people just absorb a stereotype or a prejudice and they don't necessarily mean anything by it. It's just their brain is shortcutting stuff so that they can move on to the thing that they really need to do, like eating or something. So when somebody, yeah. So when I experience a microaggression where somebody says something that to me feels like, why did you just say that to me? I do have a lot of compassion for people. I would like to say that I have a very clever response to microaggressions, but I really don't. I think if the biggest one that I kind of get is, oh, you don't look Chinese. A, what does that even mean? And B, why did you think that was a helpful contribution to what we were talking about?
Yes.
So,
yes.
Yeah. And so, I mean, that's the kind of thing that I get more than anything else, which, you know, in the grand scheme of things is not super horrible for me.
I guess for, you know, it's a teaching moment too. And I like, and I've heard that used before. What did you mean by that is a way to not put somebody on the spot, but clarify, you know, and if somebody's aware enough, they might step back and be like, oh, wait a second. Like, you know, if somebody's totally oblivious, they're not going to get even that nice way of doing it. If you're meeting somebody, and you know, like myself or whatever, and you're going to approach somebody and talk to them about culture and ethnicity, or, you know, what approach do you take to?
If I'm having a conversation with somebody about that topic, it's either because they approached me or it's an environment where it was very explicit that this is what we're talking about. I guess an exception would be if I'm chatting with somebody and some controversial thing happened, then we're just talking about it. We just dive in. I don't feel like there's a lot of times when I'm, you know, preparing to have a big conversation with somebody about this where it's not already established that this is why we came together.
Yeah. Were there cultural expectations of you growing up more around education, relationships, maybe not so much as like a child, but as you got into teenage years, as we talked a little bit off camera, that, you know, being a female adds another layer to the cultural thing, based on how different cultural traditions, you know, say, you know, males have to be this or females have to be that, or, you know, so yeah, what was that like for you when you were possibly maybe first dating or considering going to college? Or
those are so many interesting questions. So I would say that the cultural lens of my experience is really that we were very Americanized. And so, you know, my dad did things like when I was a kid, he bought me this really cool woodworking set. And I just thought, this is awesome. Like, I love building little structures with my tiny little hammer and my tiny little saw and these miniature little nails. And so I definitely feel like my family was quite progressive in terms of, you know, gender things were maybe more loose than I guess some families were that I understood to be. I also, when I was going to college or getting ready to go to college, I guess when I was in high school, before I went to college, I just love school. I love school so much. It's my happy place. If I could be in school forever, I would be in school forever. As a student, as a teacher, I have to be really careful because, I also love teaching, but it takes up, I would put all my time into that and I would neglect other responsibilities. So I'm not a teacher right now. But I remember when I was thinking about going to school, my mom stopped me in the kitchen and said, well, why do you want to go to school? And then I thought there was a correct answer. So I said, to get a better job to make more money. Because that's what people say is the reason to go to college. And she got really mad at me. And she said,
wow.
She's like, that is not why you go to college. You go to college so that you can learn things and become, she didn't say better person, but she said something along the lines of, become a more well-rounded person, something like that.
Yeah.
And she's like, you can make money doing all sorts of things, and it's probably even more effective to make money not going to college. And so after this lecture, I was just kind of like...
She was way ahead of her time. No.
Yeah, no, she sure was. Yeah. And so I was kind of like, felt a little wobbly after that conversation, but I felt also very, very supported because...
That's awesome.
Because the things that I wanted to study in school, I wanted to study everything. So I I started in a junior college and I just wanted to take all the classes I could. So I took science classes. I really wanted to do chemistry and physics and calculus. Those were my three, science, math kinds of things. But I also wanted to do art. I wanted to study figure drawing. I wanted to do sculpture. I never did sculpture. I signed up, but I kept canceling that one because limited time. But I just wanted to do all the things that college could offer. And I went to City College of San Francisco for 3 years, and I would have stayed there longer. But at a certain point, I realized if I want to go to school with some of my friends who are at the 4-year university, I would have to transfer. So I did transfer to a 4-year, and then when I graduated, I actually went back to City College to take more stuff. Yeah. I feel like...
Do your parents, do they have college degrees?
Yeah, both of them do. Mm-hmm.
And what were they in?
So my mom has a bachelor's degree in textiles and economics.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And my dad had, I think it's a business administration degree, and then he went back for an associate's degree so that he could qualify for a specific job that he wanted. Which is funny because I also got an undergrad degree and then later went back for an associate's degree in theater arts because I hadn't studied any of that stuff. And
that's why you went back to City College.
Well, okay, so no, I went back to City College just because I loved a lot of their programs there. I think I went to take more art classes. I did theater arts at Laney College because I was living in the East Bay at that point. That school's in Oakland, and so they have a really great theater program. And I was taking so many classes there that I just figured, well, I might as well get the certificate or whatever it is, the degree. Yeah.
And so one of the questions I asked you leading up prior to us meeting was when did you first have one of those experiences where something is said or somebody does something that makes you question, I guess it would be question your identity in a way to say, oh, wait a second, like that person's looking at me this way or that way. They've identified me as that. You mentioned that was in high school. Was there a specific instance that you remember?
So I think the instance that I was thinking about was in college. I started participating in this really awesome Asian American arts program. And I remember one day another student from my high school came into the program and saw me and just kind of stopped in their tracks and was like, I don't know how I feel about you being here. And I was like, why do you get an opinion about whether I'm here or not? But then also I realized, okay, I think this is about, am I Asian enough to be in this space? Interestingly, though, with that particular program, there was already a multiracial Asian American woman in the program in a leadership position. So I knew that I belonged. And it was strange for me to be in a space where I felt part of a community and then somebody else was joining the community and questioned if I belong there. It's like, I already proved that I belong here because I've been here.
Yeah. That's, and I love that you mentioned the representation that was there that gave you inspiration, which I'm sure your representation in the circles that you're in and other places is giving others inspiration. What did your circle of friends look like then, high school to college? Was it mixed, or did you gravitate to one side or the other?
So it was pretty mixed. I would say where I grew up, there were a lot more Asian people in general. So my friend group was probably a higher percent Asian, but it was very mixed. As I got older, and especially now that I live in LA and I'm in the film industry, it's definitely the percentage of Asian people is not as high as that. It's funny to like kind of break down into demographics, like who I'm hanging out with. But I would say, it shifted a little bit just because the community that I am physically in, the population demographics are different. So I would say it really depends on what the demographics are around me. And then that's kind of who shows up.
And for a parent or an adult who is in a similar position, finding their identity, going through identity crises like we sometimes do, or somebody who is looking to pass on wisdom to their children, what would you tell them that, like, if to say, or some advice about if somebody says you're not Asian enough, here is what you can say to them?
I love this challenge of having clever quips for responding to situations. I feel like sometimes I'm very clever, but in this particular situation, I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things where, and maybe my reaction of just kind of a stunned blank stare is adequate because, like, what are people even talking about?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, nobody gets to decide where you belong unless they're physically deciding, who can be in a space. So I think in the industry that I am in, there are a lot of ways where people have to feel confident in who they are and advocate for themselves. So regardless of whether it's a cultural background thing or it's their own confidence in being prepared enough to do this career, I just feel like we're all being tested constantly.
If you were sharing with me, which I'm going to ask you to, a statement, I am Asian enough because, what does that mean to you? If somebody said something to your children, oh, you're not Asian enough, how would you explain that this is what Asian is versus not being Asian enough?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I feel like people identify in so many different ways, and I think that at the end of the day, it has to be, what does the individual person feel like? And I think this is probably true in a lot of different situations where we can't be expected to defend ourselves to other people. I think that I very strongly identify as Asian. I didn't necessarily do that as a kid, not because I didn't connect with being Asian, but just because it didn't really occur to me a whole lot. I was just living my life. And I think there's a lot of ways in which people want to assign labels for their own convenience on other people, but it kind of doesn't really matter what somebody else's labels are. Except when it, like I said, unless it's a situation where they're a gatekeeper for a space, then that's when it really matters. But as a person going through the world, feeling like I belong somewhere, I think that's more about me and less about anyone else.
Oh, I love that. It's beautiful. Thank you so much for that. Let's jump a little bit into where you're at now as a writer for both stage and screen. Did you move into that space once you found out you were passionate about it? What types of projects most interested you in at first when you were moving into that space?
When I was starting to get into theater, I was actually at a little bit of a crossroads. I had studied conservation and resource studies, and I was working. I had studied conservation and resource studies, and I was working at a nonprofit nature magazine doing marketing and fundraising. And I really wanted to go into nonprofit business administration. So I was looking into a program at UC Berkeley, a grad program for that. And their big requirement was they wanted people who had work experience, which at that point I hadn't had a lot because I had just graduated from my undergrad. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll go back to school and just take some classes to fortify my business skills while also having some fun. So I took a statistics class, and then I took a theater class, an acting class.
I was going to say statistics.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I'd already studied calculus, but I never did statistics.
Okay.
Because I didn't need to for my program. Anyway, so I was doing statistics, and then I also took this acting class, and the acting class was the thing that totally got me hooked on theater. So I hung around the theater program a lot. I got this really great opportunity to write a play for the children's touring theater program. And then that built a lot of confidence and experience when I was, right after I gave birth to my first child, I was really dealing with a lot of postpartum angst. And so I wrote this play and turned it into a site-specific production about the trauma of just having given birth. And I really loved the play at the time. Then I showed it to a friend a few years later, and she's like, I don't think this play is as good as you think it is. And I'm like, I will never read that play again. I don't want to know. But it was really helpful, and it got me to explore theater and collaboration in a way that I hadn't really done on my own before. And it gave me a lot of confidence that if I can be excited about something, then I can find other people who are excited to do the work with me. And then slowly I got really engaged in theater and really committed to doing, I had an independent theater company called Altarian Theater, which actually I think you saw some of our stuff.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. So I got to do that for a long time. I also became the executive director of a nonprofit playwrights organization in Berkeley. And at a certain point, I said, I need to go back to school. And so I decided to pursue dramatic writing as a graduate program. And when I committed to that, it occurred to me, this is very expensive. I'm going to need to pay my bills. So I didn't totally abandon theater, but I definitely intentionally chose to get more into screenwriting, because even though screenwriting is also a difficult career path, it's more viable as an income source than playwriting. So that's kind of the journey I ended up taking.
And what did your first works look like? Did your culture impact the work that you were writing? Was there obviously the play about you having a child was about that experience, but was it, did you feel at first like that you were writing caricatures of yourself, or stuck in this frame, or what did that look like to you at first?
Yeah, so I think actually I kind of skipped this, but when I was in high school, I would also write comic books. I did indie comics, and I feel like a lot of my tropey kinds of stereotypical stories came out during that time. At the beginning of my playwriting, I think this was a benefit for me. The play that I was writing was an adaptation of The Ants and the Grasshopper. And so I got to write a lot of characters who didn't necessarily seem like direct links to me, even though every character that I write is an extension of me in some ways. And that was cool because I got to play with the idea of the ants being one community and the grasshoppers being another community, and how do they engage and what are the conflicts that are created when creatures with super different needs and perspectives come together. So I feel like pretty early on I got to incorporate some of my worldview about multiculturalism into that.
Your environmentalism, where did that love come from? Is that something that was developed as a child by your parents or in the household, or?
Well, so when I was in third grade, my teacher had a collection of comic books. I think were all Disney comic books, and they were about resource exploitation. So it was about how oil as a resource wasn't renewable and it was going to run out, and we had to conserve energy in order to preserve this really critical part of our infrastructure. So, which is kind of a lot of ideas for a third grader, but it really blew my mind, and I always stuck with that. And my dad was very concerned about conservation in a lot of ways that, like he didn't want to waste water. He didn't want to waste objects that we had. He was really good about repurposing things. And my mom was also really good about repurposing things. So when I was in middle school, I actually also became vegan for a long time.
Oh,
and then tied in a lot of my environmental interests in my veganism, because I realized that the meat industry is really bad for the environment. And
yes, yeah.
In addition to making me sad about harming animals,
yes.
There's a lot of pollution that comes out of that. So so as a high schooler, I was very passionate about a lot of things. I was very active about a lot of things. I started petitions that were handwritten, because back when I was in high school, computers were around, but they weren't super around. So I had handwritten petitions that I would collect and then mail off. I would, do all sorts of things to talk to people about issues I was concerned about. So when I was going to my college program and my mom asked me this question about why I want to go to college, like the real answer was that I knew if I had an opportunity to go to a school that exposed me to the kind of experts about the environment that I wanted to meet and to be in community with people who cared about these things, then I felt very confident I could make a really positive impact on the world.
That's awesome. You do follow your passion. I mean, you do understand that, I have to, I'm going to do grant writing, or I'm going to do this nonprofit marketing work or whatever to pay the bills. But you've kind of also shared that along the way, like you're always kind of following the stream, which is really awesome. And the part about the environmentalism, do you feel that, I don't know who controls it per se, but the narrative on it, do you feel like it speaks to diversity, or do you feel like it's a very narrow message? And say, for instance, my take on it being an environmentalist is okay, there's things that, like you mentioned, your family has kind of, either from the generation they were in, kind of like my parents were, like my dad was pretty old. He was post depression generation. They just conserved things, like, and they kind of kept everything, was that hoarding or was that sustainability? You know what I'm saying?
Or a little of both.
Yeah. So, with the work that you're doing, are you trying to expand that narrative?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Definitely.
And what does that look like as far as the work that you have that you have in the hopper?
So last year, I co-founded a film production company called Erosion with my really good friend and business partner, Megan Morrison. And we have a variety of projects. All of them are meant to inspire conversation about conservation using comedy. So campy horror, family-friendly musicals, just regular comedies. And one of the projects that we do is called Conservation Starters. And we started this one before the writer's strike and had to pause it. Now we're kind of getting back into it. But basically, it's a web series that's free on YouTube. It's accessible to everybody. And the idea is that it's an anthology comedy web series where different writers can present a conservation topic that interests them, that helps us have conversation about climate that is a little bit more nuanced or a little bit more colorful than the conversations that we usually have about it. So, so our hope is that by bringing in people with very different backgrounds, they can shed a new light on something that's important to them. So we have people who have different ethnic and racial backgrounds, people with different disabilities, gender identities, sexual orientations, a variety of perspectives, including geographic, you talked about growing up in Wyoming. It's important for us that we're not just making stories for people on the coasts, because a lot of people live in other parts of the country.
Yes, for sure.
I just feel like the more inclusive we can be with the conversation, the more productive the conversation is. Like, I was with somebody who identifies as Black and got really upset and said, Black people care about the whales too. Mm. And that always stuck with me because, I wouldn't have necessarily questioned it. But I also wasn't thinking about that either.
Sure.
And so definitely that's something that motivates me, is to make sure that we're not pretending like this is a white woman's pet project. It's everybody.
Yes, Instagram influencer type. Yeah. So I did hear a particular statistic, and I don't want to get it. I probably get the numbers wrong, but it was something about when surveyed, 75% of Americans were concerned about the environment. But the percentage of those 75 that felt other people were concerned about the environment was like down in like the 30s. So people are concerned. You're using your art to try to elevate that, and I love that. It has to be. I mean, the more and more we get diverse, the impact on BIPOC communities, underserved communities, is horrendous, especially around slaughterhouses or other areas where toxic waste is just dumped, and there's those disparities. So. Do you have a project coming out? Is this going to be a vignette project, or is it going to be a longer feature project?
Well, so Conservation Starters is meant to be a web series that we can produce as available in between our other projects. We also have 2 feature films and a TV pilot that we're working on either producing or finding a buyer for. And so those projects, the time scale is very unpredictable. We know that it's long, and we know that every once in a while there are going to be times where we can only focus on one of those projects, but in between we can work on the web series and build up. We use it for a variety of reasons. One of them is to build our brand so that people kind of know the stories that we want to tell. One is to build up our processes. It's a 2-year-old company, or I guess we're only a year and a half. As a 1.5-year-old company, we need to just have systems in place. And so the web series has been really helpful for us for building that. And then the other thing is sometimes we're kind of impatient and we just want to see something get made. You know what I mean? Like, it could take years to make a feature film, but it could take, if there's no strike, it could take a couple of months to produce an entire episode of a web series. So
yeah, that's so awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely share that and stuff like that. I just love. So as those things come out, pass them over. I'll update your bio on our site and share them on my socials too, because it's stuff that really speaks to me. You were involved, your involvement with the Writers Guild of America and Asian American Writing Committee. You I think took a pretty, what would you say, a pretty noticeable place during the strike. Were you like a chair board? And then the question with that would be, because you are because it was of the Asian American Writer Society or group, did you go back at all and have any of those syndrome, the imposter syndromes that you might have had prior?
It's really interesting. So when I joined Kearney Street Workshop, which was the Asian American arts nonprofit that I joined in college, I did have a really great role model, Claire Light, who's also multiracial Asian American. And when I joined the WGA and I attended the Asian American Writers Committee there, I had another really awesome female Asian American multiracial role model, Bonnie Landrum. Yeah, so Bonnie was great. Yeah, which is really cool for me because, you know, when you're new to a community, you don't know what to expect. And it's not necessarily that I felt that I didn't belong in the space, but seeing Bonnie being very inviting of me coming into the space really meant a lot. And when the WGA committees do events, they always have food, or they usually have food if they haven't spent all their budget on it earlier. But at the end of the night, I remember there were a bunch of leftovers. I was like, oh man, I wish I could take these home. And Bonnie just announced everybody needs to take home leftovers. I was like, these are my people. I feel very welcome here. Yeah. So I never once questioned that I did or didn't belong in that particular group, mainly because I already, I just felt like I was home in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways, moving to LA was kind of a culture shock, but going into that particular community and that committee helped me feel like, okay, I belong here. I'm home. This feels right to me. So for me to participate in all of the activities that we did during the strike, and even before that, because we did have the Stop Asian Hate letter that we drafted together. I just felt like this is my community. And of all the ones that I'm involved with out here, I think that one really, I feel the most connected to.
That's great. And what were there other places you went to find community, or were you just really busy in this space, and that's where you spent most of your time when you moved and you felt a little like displaced, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I was really fortunate. When I first arrived, I applied for Playground Los Angeles, which is a nonprofit new play development program that actually started in the Bay Area. So I was involved with the Bay Area version. And then when I got accepted into the Los Angeles version, I felt like, okay, I have something to cling to.
Yeah.
I also did have a lot of friends out here who were moving out at the same time that I was, or just after me. And I had met a lot of writers because I had won this award from the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation. And the year before I graduated, they actually had a national summit for all the winners of their different contests. So I actually got to make some pretty good friends through that. And so I feel like when I first arrived, I had a little bit of a support system already. Yeah. And I definitely, any group that I could find or join, I tried to get involved with. So there are other Asian American writing groups out here that I'm involved with. I was able to create and join some writing groups with different writer affiliations that I had. Yeah. So through the Sloan Foundation, but also through alumni from my program. Yeah, community is very, very important to me because as a writer, I can make a lot of excuses for not producing a draft. Yes. But if I have other people waiting.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I feel pretty good about the different opportunities I've had to connect with other people out here.
Yeah, and I think it's something that I've moved around to is, I always also look for like communities often through nonprofits and volunteering, because at least I'll get people who have similar interests in helping others. And that's often a really cool common bond to have with other people that you usually click with too,
Definitely.
So, let's talk about you're joining Ride Back Rise, the inaugural cohort. Sounds awesome.
It is very awesome.
Yeah, yes. Yeah. Congratulations.
So, thank you. Dan Lin is a big producer out here. He was responsible for creating the entire Lego movie franchise, and he has a production company called Ride Back. And so a couple years ago, they created a nonprofit called Ride Back Rise to help elevate BIPOC screenwriters. And so before the strike, my understanding is that they gathered a group of fellows and residents to help them develop pitches and just prepare them for greater and better opportunities in the industry. And then this year they wanted to add to that program by having a cohort of 200 professional screenwriters in their Circle program. So I got into the Circle program this year, and it feels like a genuine and very supported program. And the people who have been selected have all done pretty great things on their own. And the purpose of the program is really just to get people together and see what can happen when you bring people together and provide extra resources and connections and support. So I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, it sounds awesome. That'd be fun. That'd be fun to, I guess from that, you talk about, there's, they're bringing individuals together to underrepresented cultures and BIPOC individuals. Why do you think this is going to kind of be one of those big picture questions? Why do you think that it's so important to make sure we're sharing those voices of diversity, multiracial, biracial, gender, all the different variations of gender and other? Why do you feel it's so important? And I'm going to take it even one step higher. Like, why do you think it's important to like humanity, kind of with where we're at right now?
Well, I'm glad you're ending with an easy question. I mean, for me, a lot of conflict comes from a lack of appreciation for or understanding of the fact that everybody's experience and priorities and needs are different. I, for a long time, just assumed that people had core values that matched mine. And over the last decade, I've started to realize, no, some people just totally don't prioritize the things that I think are important. And it's not that anybody's right or wrong in their priorities. Obviously, I would vote for certain priorities over others. But it does mean that if we're making decisions that impact large numbers of the population, we need to acknowledge that these choices have ripple effects. And if we're ignoring core needs, then we're going to have more problems. I just think that the more we can share stories that humanize life experiences and cultures and communities that we're not familiar with, the easier it is for us to collaborate with other people and make choices that are beneficial for more people.
Yeah. And you know what? One of the things we know is that there's, some big communication companies that are kind of controlling all of, like Netflix, controlling all of what we see. What are some other ways that you recommend people get out and diversify their, I wouldn't say entertainment as much as it's like an edutainment, learning through things like theater and reading and other things?
I think that just experiencing as many different kinds of art and storytelling as possible is really important. So, last night I got to see a show at a very small site-specific theater company that I'd never been to before. It's called In-House Theater. And I left that show just being kind of blown away that for whatever the price of the ticket I spent, the quality of the show was so high and the space was so intimate. I just felt like this is something that seems unattainable for people, but I live in a place where I can experience this. And I think there are a lot of ways that people can expose themselves to stories that don't cost a lot of money and aren't super inaccessible. Like, even if it's just a matter of going onto different Instagram profiles or TikTok pages, that's very achievable. We can purposely seek out perspectives that differ from ours so that we can get a sense of what other people are experiencing and how they're interpreting things that are happening around us. But at the same time, like, there are a lot of cultural groups, community groups creating public events that people can go to. And maybe there are things that are being put on by, schools or churches or, people like me making a ragtag indie theater production at a baby store in my friend's basement. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I think being open to the stories that are being told in unconventional spaces is as important to any other kind of openness, because those stories are not being vetted and processed and filtered through any other lens than the creators. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, not cookie cutter.
Right. Yeah, or even being rewritten to the point that the original idea has been taken out. And I've seen a lot of indie theater. I've seen a lot of indie film. And I think that sometimes people overlook those kinds of stories because they want to see something really produced and really polished. But I think it's also valuable to go to projects that, you know, are still kind of being developed, because then that's when you get to see what is the thing that's driving somebody to spend all their free time, because you know that they're not making money doing some of this art. Yeah. So it's like, what is a story that they feel like they need to tell people? And can you be a witness for that?
Yeah. And you know, I've asked every guest so far about how do we attain world peace? Like, what's your recipe? I know that the last question was kind of a curveball because I didn't share it with you earlier, but I have been asking everybody, do you have a recipe for world peace? Is there a chance?
I feel like world peace is such a movable target, and it kind of goes back to my earlier comment about, I think that everybody's priorities are so different that if everybody valued peace, then I think we could work towards it. But because some people don't, just because of whatever their beliefs are, peace is not the highest priority. There are other things that are more important. And some of it, I think, also is, you know, it could be a privilege to value peace over other priorities.
Ooh, yeah, definitely.
That said, I think that we can move toward a more peaceful society by just being more accepting of the fact that everybody here on this planet is living a life and they're trying to do the best that they can with it. And maybe their approach doesn't align with my approach, but if I can have a space for them to thrive in the way that I want other people to have a space for me to thrive, then I think that can lead to more peace.
Right on. I'm going to ask you one more question that just came up with what you said about it's a privilege, and you're right. Like it's a privilege to think about peace. We're not in the middle of like war right now, or, you know, like we have roofs over our head, you know. How do you ally up for other groups and use your privilege as an Asian American screenwriter, playwriter, you know, whatever socioeconomic background you have? How do you use your privilege and allyship? What does that look like in your world?
A lot of it for me is showing up for events that people from other communities are putting on, because I think a lot of times it can be frustrating that a group will put so much effort into hosting an event that's meant to enlighten others about their situation and just kind of elevate their stories and their artists, and people don't show up to it. So for me, a lot of it is just doing my best to come to things. And the other part is, whenever I can, I think it's important to include these other perspectives in my stories. So with Conservation Starters, we're actually seeking out and hiring people who have these perspectives that differ from ours, so that we can make sure that they're somehow represented in the work that we're putting out into the world. And when I'm telling stories, I like to figure out, am I reflecting the world that I live in a way that is meaningful? In other words, are the characters coming from different populations? Are their life experiences different enough from each other within the story to resonate with people from different backgrounds? I think also sometimes it's a matter of just acknowledging when something is happening. There's so many things going on in the world right now that are really difficult for people, and specific populations are being targeted. I think it's really important to just acknowledge that I'm aware of somebody else's struggle, even if I personally can't do a whole lot about it. Yeah. Because a lot of, I feel like a lot of times people who I know who are hurt by things that impact their community, the thing that stings the most is feeling like nobody cares.
Yeah. It's a good note to end on. I think very similarly, like showing up for others, because we don't know when we're gonna need someone to show up for us, you know.
Exactly.
And not just a matter of it's, you know, tit for tat, but because we, you know, care about the human condition. So thank you so much for your time. I learned so much about you. I'll learn so much more when I go back and listen again. And I really appreciate your time. I'm excited about the work that you're doing, especially the conservation work. And where can people find you? And any shout outs you want to give?
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. I want to shout out to you for inviting me on your program. I can be found on social media, mostly through the handle Tracy Held Writer, TRACYHELD Writer. I will have more stuff posted for Erosion when we complete our fundraising efforts, which by the time this show airs, maybe you will be around now.
Awesome.
And in terms of shout outs, I don't know. I just appreciate everyone who has been supporting all the different people going on strike this year. There's been a lot of industries impacted and a lot of people just trying to advocate for livable conditions when they create a product or a service for other people. So that's been very, very important.
Yes. I appreciate you for all the work you've done inside your day job and outside in nonprofit work. And we'll have to have you back in the future and talk about Ride Back and the other work that you're doing. So
that's awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. I'd love to.
Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
Thank you for joining us for the Multiracialverse podcast. My name is Antonio Fernandez. You can find this podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Huge shout out to my friend Johannes Skoda for mixing and creating the intro music, and DJ Kazam for the track.